Time to hit the floor. Wake up to the buzz. Heart hits like a glove. Feel that adrenaline rush.
Happy Saturday and welcome to the Leadoff on the Peak One Sports Network, brought to you by Apogee Grafix, taking your vision to new heights. Go to apogeegrafix.com and use promo code PEAK1 for 10% off your order. I'm Ashton here to get you ready for your sports weekend. Thanks for listening, however you're tuning in. Let's bring in the other part of the Leadoff Morning Show. Tony, how are you doing this championship Saturday?
Beautiful rainy day here in North Texas.
Yeah, it's good football weather. I mean,
Great football weather.
any football being played here is indoors. But I mean, that may be one of the more negative parts of championships and playoffs, and they're all played in domes now in college football. They're just going to these NFL stadiums. You don't really get you'll get the good matchup, but you're not getting the
outside of last night's game, the Mountain West.
Yeah, those smaller ones they play home.
They were actually Boise was at home in that game.
And I know they didn't have a Pac-12, technically didn't have a Pac-12 championship. I know I shared on social media, it was an Oregon State and Washington State played. It was just one game because there's only two teams in that conference. And that Oregon State, they're the Pac-12 champs with a losing record. Well, I guess they had a losing record at the time. I don't know. Maybe they're still
the end of the Pac-12's revamping. They're not going to be what we've known as the Pac-12. I think they've given an invite to Texas State. They're going to be Mountain West Conference.
Yeah.
I can't say it. Conference.
On top.
Similar to that.
So I haven't seen that. It's a bit now. They did. I didn't even read that. They offered it to Texas State, which I guess isn't any weirder than to SMU in the ACC.
Yeah.
But is every team in their conference state? Washington State, Oregon State, Boise State, Fresno State, Texas State. Now there were a lot. They should just like the Pac-12 state conference or something. I haven't seen if they invited anybody that didn't have state in their name. Now I just think it might be just a bit. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of like what, I guess it's not exactly like that, but like the Conference USA now is really the AAC with some teams moving into the Big 12. The Big 12 kind of looks like not as dramatic as the Pac-12 getting all these Mountain West teams, but they got a lot of, they got UCF and Houston, and they get a lot of the conference, naturally. Not Cincinnati. Cincinnati was in the, I don't know. I think they're the ACC, and but yeah, they're getting a lot of teams like that. So I mean, they have to retain their FBS status. But do we look at it as a Power 5 conference? I mean, the Mountain West with whatever money. I mean, I don't know what money the Pac-12 has now, but they do have, the viewership and everything a little bit more than the Mountain West. So it'll be Mountain West improved.
Yeah,
but we're looking at it as a power conference.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, Boise State, we'll get into that later. They just won their respective conference championship game. So, I mean, they're on the uptick. I think Boise State should have been in the Pac-12 a decade ago. But we'll get into that. So last night, we'll just go ahead and jump into it. Last night, 3 conference championship games. I guess we'll call this conference championship weekend.
Yeah.
Instead of just Saturday. Jacksonville State over Western Kentucky in the Conference USA Championship. Army beats Tulane in the AAC. So Army with a chance to make it to the playoff. I know Boise State pretty much punched their ticket winning the Mountain West. They take down at UNLV last night.
And that was an exciting game.
Yeah, it was. I was kind of watching it for the intrigue of, I can't remember. I talked about it on the show when who was the quarterback that held out after they started 3-0. I just can imagine. So they went 10-2, made it. UNLV made it 10-2, and made it to the Mountain West Championship. I can't remember the quarterback's name, but he held out after that 3-0 start to enter the transfer portal and retain his this eligible year. I just imagine his value just went down so much this season. Holding out in your team still has a lot of success. I think one of the most successful years in UNLV.
If Ashton Genty didn't prove that he's the best college football player this season, I don't know what anyone's watching. This kid rushed for 209 yards in a conference championship game. He literally put this team on his back and ran. I mean, one of the runs was a big, he broke a big run. But at the end of the game, instead of just clocking the ball, they're handing it to him for 3, 4, 5, 6 yards, continuing just to chug down the field to run the clock out.
Yeah, Dion may have something to say about that. But I mean, the Heisman winner's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be a team that doesn't make the playoff. You've seen it. Like, it's going to be a team that makes like a BCS bowl game, a championship game, makes it into the 14 playoff. I think Ashton Genty has I think he's probably the front runner. I mean, he's got to be after now. Not 100%. To go down this rabbit hole, but before we talk about today's games, the fact that they handed off to Genty so much and he's getting 25, 30 carries a game. As much as we know about the running back position, especially in the NFL, and I know it's not 30 carries in the Mountain West against Mountain West teams, not the same as 30 carries in the NFL. But does that dissuade you from taking him higher? Not necessarily as a Cowboy, a draft pick for the Cowboys, but anybody, because he probably is already well into his deterioration as a running back, right? As we've seen
in a normal circumstance, I might say yes, but this kid hasn't played football until he got into high school.
Okay.
The kid was overseas. Hopefully I don't get this wrong. I think in Italy, and he was in Europe somewhere.
Don't worry, the commenters will let you know.
They'll let me know.
Yeah.
I forget exactly what it was. I didn't have it.
Probably hatefully.
So he's a late bloomer to football, to the game of football.
Yeah.
When he started, I guess at his high school, he was too young to be able to play, or however that works there. So he's bought his time. As soon as he hit the field, people were saying this kid's a star. Then they come to the States. He goes to Boise State, and I think the rest is history as far as that goes to this point. I think he's anyone that needs a running back in the NFL and passes on him, I think is dumb. This might be one of the first, these is one of those generational running backs,
Yeah.
I think and what we've seen from the resurgence of running backs in the NFL, right? We see guys, maybe they've stayed somewhere too long, they move around, and now, you've got running backs all over the league that are making an impact and a difference. I think there's a shift in the NFL from such a shotgun and passing attack as it is mixing in more running attack.
Yeah. A lot of people comparing Bijan Robinson to Barry Sanders. I mean, and we'll see. I think he's been a little disappointing, but they're saying that Ashton Genty's better than Bijan.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, I wouldn't take him with like a top 5 pick or anything, but my mode of thinking is you're probably not giving your running back a second contract anyway. Unless he's just that good, then you're glad you have him, right? It's just, man, if I pick him 9, 10, 11, the chances of me, I think a lot of teams NFL teams are judged on how many second contracts those draft picks get and how successful of a draft it was. It's a lot to give up, but I mean,
which I don't agree with that. You get a draft pick every year, in every round, essentially. Now, if you trade those away, that's on the general manager. But this in the NFL, it's a win now situation. No coach has second contract aspirations. That's not what you're looking at. You're looking at what can you do now in the first 4 to 5 years. You take a player, that's going to impact your team in the first 4 to 5 years early. These later draft picks, those will be guys that just fill those spots for long term, for practice squad, for those situations. I think too much of the NFL is they are looking at the contracts, and I understand it's a business and there's numbers and dollars involved, but the teams that manage it the best are the ones that look for those impactful players early, and they go to win now, and then they'll restructure contracts. They'll get you will end up developing players when you have a franchise that you can have a quarterback, have players that are willing to restructure contracts to be team friendly.
Yeah, and I mean the Jaguars might be one who could benefit because they're going to have a higher draft pick. They have their quarterback. I don't know um, how win now they are, but like I said, they have their quarterback. Up until this season, they've kind of been teetering on, around the playoffs, and Ashton and Tony, running back like him, might be able to push them over the top. Not sure. I mean, I wouldn't suggest, like I said, I wouldn't take him top 5 because typically if you're picking top 5, you have so many other needs, and by the time you run him into the ground, like it's going to take a few years to get to that championship status.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, GMs and coaches aren't. I mean, you think from a fan standpoint, I'm a fan forever. You can't fire me. But a GM and a coach, like we have to go get that big time move.
Yeah.
They're not thinking, okay, they might have a 5-year plan or whatever, but they're not thinking, well, if I get him, then by the time we're contending, he's, that they can't, you're right. They're working lots of times season to season.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping to today with the championship games, the Big 12 championship at 11 a.m. Central Time at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. Iowa State versus Arizona State. I think this is a surprise. You look at the beginning of the year, Utah was obviously probably a favorite, the Big 12. Probably halfway through the season, you're looking at BYU, obviously, is the team.
They showed us who they really were after that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they really fell off a cliff. Kansas, who's been, even Kansas State to an extent, but Kansas has kind of been that solid team all year. And then I don't think Oklahoma State was as highly touted as Utah, but I thought they could contend. And then obviously
they had a shot with Texas and Oklahoma leaving. They had a shot.
This was their year.
12, yeah, and Colorado too. Don't leave them out. Their fate was in their own hands.
And yeah, Colorado. I'm not gonna say they get snubbed. Obviously, it goes by standings, but I thought Colorado was in the driver's seat for.
No, they were. I mean, if they win their final game,
yeah,
they're in. That's it.
Iowa State winning 3 straight to make it to the conference championship after dropping back-to-back games to Texas Tech and Kansas. So maybe not one of the better matchups, maybe not one that you're looking forward to outside of being from Iowa or Arizona. But definitely teams that kind of came out of nowhere and you didn't expect to be in the championship game. And one of these teams is going to be in the playoff. I don't know that you would have picked Iowa State or Arizona State having a shot at the playoff this year.
No.
SEC championship game at 3, Texas versus Georgia rematch game where Texas lost 30-15. After watching the A&M game, I know that the score I don't think was indicative of really where that game was. Texas struggled a bit. It was a close game. A&M kept it close with some big turnovers, big plays. As a Texas fan, I don't know that I feel very confident going into this game. I can't say, oh yeah, they're different from, that Georgia game, because they went into that Georgia game similar to now. Like they're not dominating necessarily. They're beating decent teams, but kind of letting them hang around and just getting weird scores where, yeah, you win by double digits.
Mm-hmm.
They go in there, get down 20-0, come back a little bit. I don't know. Do you think? Obviously, Georgia's in a similar situation. They just barely beat Georgia Tech in a multi-overtime game. Georgia's have had some weird losses, so it's kind of like which Georgia and which Texas team show up.
Yeah,
because I could see this going either way.
Yeah, I've said it from the beginning of the season. Um, I think this Texas roster is the best roster in college football. I think they're the most talented, pound for pound, position for position in college football today. They've struggled. They don't really know who their quarterback is. Um, this 1-2 punch has gotten them where they are, but it's also gotten them where they are. I think if they were to be able to solidify who the quarterback is and get the quarterback play that they expect, they're
Yeah.
they're undefeated and they're the number one team in the country right now.
Uh,
Quinn Ewers has definitely been has underperformed from what you would think,
yeah.
and at times that causes Arch Manning to come into the game.
Uh,
I honestly would rather see Arch Manning just take the helm here.
yeah. I like what they've used, where they've used Arch Manning in that A&M game, where they kind of just brought him in situational rather than the rest of the season. He kind of just come in. It's a blowout. Quinn Ewers was really struggling. Um, I think they're in a difficult position, but I know Ewers has the experience in big time games. He's taken down Alabama.
Mhm.
He's beaten Oklahoma twice. Michigan, whatever you want to say Michigan is now, you went into Michigan and beat them. So he has that experience, and this is a big game. Obviously, I think Arch Manning is better. I think right now he's better. It's just a little bit of inexperience because Ewers has the experience. He just has to stay healthy and stay consistent because that's kind of how these games go. Ewers can have a really good game or a really bad game, and it's usually not in between. If he starts
Mhm.
off slow, he can, might have a little bit of a run to get into it to make it look like a pretty good stat line.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely been disappointing every season for Texas going in as a Heisman candidate. And I know injury has played a part in that, but even outside of injury, he hasn't really performed the last 2 seasons at all in Heisman capability.
Yeah.
The ACC championship at 7. Um, Locally, this is an intriguing one. You have SMU versus Clemson. A little surprising Clemson ran in there because I was up
They
until the
had a
last
rough
minute I thought it
start.
was going to be Miami.
Yeah. Clemson had a rough start to the season. Um, yeah, and then Miami, man, they lost at the wrong time, to an unranked Syracuse team.
Yeah, um, I know Miami struggled a little bit. They played. I stayed up to watch a late game. It was a late start. It was against Cal, where they ended. I don't remember if it went to overtime or they won in the last drive, but I mean, Cal had a double digit lead on them, or maybe it's just a 2 possession lead on Miami. Miami came back and won, so I thought Miami has that kryptonite in there, and yeah, they weren't invincible by any means. Obviously, you see that with Syracuse.
Mhm.
SMU, first season in a power conference for SMU, they make the championship game. And I have a stat to go over later. First time or first year teams in certain conferences. We'll go over that, but just SMU from I know it was a long time ago, but from going through the death penalty in the late '80s and '90s to really being a laughing stock in the '90s and early 2000s, a little bit of resurgence. But this is their first season since then where they're in like a really good conference
Yeah.
in Conference USA. Uh, for a long time. The AAC, which, like I mentioned earlier, is just kind of the Conference USA bumping up to a more powerful conference, I guess. And
Yeah.
first season they go out. I mean, I remember watching the first game against Nevada this year, losing. Um, they haven't lost since, beating Louisville, beating Pitt.
Mhm.
Really good games.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they're gonna be a hot team coming in. Obviously, they're low on a lot of people's radar. I don't think they're another one of those teams. I don't think you saw, having a shot at making the playoff. And in this situation, having a shot at a first round bye, which I'm sure we'll talk about later when we get into the predictions and
Yeah,
how this bracket could line out and how we could see this happen. But you look up and down the list of potential teams to make the playoff. It's astonishing the teams that we're seeing here.
Yeah.
This isn't what we thought, and I think that a lot of us going into it, we thought, oh, you had a 4-team playoff. Well, if you go to a 10-team, a 12-team playoff, like all you're going to do is just see still those top 10 or 12 teams, and we've seen a huge shakeup.
I do have a
with
little
it.
tidbit on that later.
And it's made it much more exciting of a college football season because just as we saw go into the Texas A&M Texas game, Texas A&M wins, they're in the SEC championship. Most likely, they're in the playoffs now.
Yeah. That's
It
why I
comes
said
down
Texas
to
and Texas A&M when A&M lost to Auburn and Georgia beat Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago, or I guess Georgia Tech last week, last Friday, and then A&M a couple weeks ago. That Texas A&M game was essentially the start of the playoffs for both Texas and Texas A&M because I don't think I think Texas. I mean, they don't statistically officially have a spot in the playoff but they'll probably be in if they lose, depending on what happens. But yeah, you're right. Texas A&M, the loser's probably out of the playoff. Then they go on, and if Texas A&M makes it, I don't know that Texas A&M makes it. They have a better shot, but I don't know that they make them if they lose to Georgia. But for sure,
right.
You keep winning, you keep going. So that,
Yeah.
for me, that was kind of the start of the playoff for both of those teams.
Which is really exciting. It gives you, we're getting ready to see for the next month real competitive college football.
Yeah. And a lot of people have said, well, it makes each game a little less meaningful. Like, yeah, you have that, but at the same time,
ask Texas A&M if every game they played this season wasn't meaningful. If
yeah.
South Carolina wasn't
Yeah.
meaningful.
I mean, maybe it's a little
If
less
Notre
meaningful
Dame,
for
if
your
the Notre
top
Dame
four
game wasn't
teams.
meaningful, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
every game now, I think has so much more of an impact. That even more so than the rankings and making championships. Like there's an opportunity for teams that, what do we have, like 15, 16 ranked teams are getting an automatic bid into the playoffs if they win their conference championship today.
Yeah, and later in the season, there are teams that are, 2-loss, 1-loss teams that in general, this would be like, okay, let's see the best bowl we could possibly make. And now it's like, hey, we have a shot. So this has a lot of meaning to it. And yeah, when we talk a little bit later on predictions and stuff, I'll tell you where, I'll tell you something about SMU my opinion. The Big Ten also, same time as the ACC championship, 7 p.m. Penn State versus Oregon. Both teams currently in the top 4 playoff rankings. So this is probably, according to college football, this is the matchup. I don't know when they decide the times these teams plays. The championships are. I don't know if they said, hey, this is going to be if prime time because it's number 1 versus number 3. Penn State, year after year, they have good teams. They're in the top 10, but they cannot just make it over the hump and get into one of these major tournaments or a BCS bowl game or whatever championship game, anyways. And Oregon early on struggled, like they struggled against, I want to say, Wyoming, Idaho, something like that. They struggled a little bit against Boise State, but that looks less hurtful to their resume since Boise State just won the Mountain West Conference.
Yeah.
But Oregon's just looked dominant since. You have Penn State possibly winning this game. This is the last big one. I guess we can go ahead and start.
I think it's this is right now. I don't, but I think this might be the most exciting game we see today. I think these are the two most evenly matched teams, and equally enough, a Penn State team being ranked number 3 and not being considered for a first week bye if they lose to the number 1 team in the country. That shouldn't affect where your ranking goes.
I think Penn State might be knocked out. I don't think it'd be favorited, but depending on how everything falls, how the committee wants to keep Alabama in with 3 losses. I'm
I
not
don't
completely convinced that they've clinched a spot, even though they're number 3.
I still think they're going to be. There's no way that you can drop them out. I think they have to be the 5 team if they lose this game.
You
Rightfully
saw
so.
the same
Really, I
thing with
think
Florida State though last year.
I think that Penn State and Oregon are going to be whoever the loser is the number 5 team
Okay.
in this bracket.
The
That's my
winner's number
prediction.
one,
Is
no matter what.
I think no matter what where these two sit, one of these has got to be the number 5 slot.
They'll be the number one, and then the number one of the teams that don't get to buy. My soundboard over here doing glitchy stuff. So I think this is going to be a good game. I think Oregon hasn't shown when they've played really good teams, Ohio State, Boise State, that it's going to stay close. They're not just going to blow them out of the water.
Yeah.
That's the vibe I get. I just don't think they're that dominant of a team. I think it's pretty evenly matched. I think it's going to be a good game. I do think Oregon takes this, and obviously would be the number one overall seed. I don't know, unless Texas wins by 3 touchdowns or something. I don't think they would jump Oregon in this situation because they're playing. I guess Georgia's number 5, so they're playing a number 5 team. Oregon playing Penn State, so I do have Oregon winning that one. Real quick, shout out to Brian Kelly for sending me this nugget. The Big 12, SEC, ACC, and Big 12 championship games all feature a first-year member to those respective conferences. Arizona State, the first year in the Big 12, Texas, the first year in the SEC, SMU, the first year in the ACC, and Oregon, the first year in the Big 10. I think that's just, showing how major, whether it's good or bad, how major it's been for this college football realignment. Like, it's not just random teams going. It's I know these have been in the works for a couple of years, but potential to 4 conference championships, and in your power, I guess is power 4 because you don't have the Pac-12 in this. So all of your power conference championship games include one new team.
Yeah.
I can't ever necessarily think positive or negative of it. It's just how impactful it is because you're just having these big teams switch conferences, and some of them for the better. Like, I think SMU in the ACC is, great for SMU, great for college football. Texas in the ACC, not good for the Big 12, but it's been good for college football. Oregon in the Big 10 is kind of weird. I don't know. I mean, we get to see these cool matchups, Oregon, Ohio State, and Oregon, Penn State, but I think I'd still rather have the original Pac-12 around. But so playoffs expanded to 12 teams this year. We've had years of frustration with the 5th and 6th teams being left out, the little guy being left out, like UCF being undefeated in 2017, and that's what this was supposed to fix. And it has. You're getting Boise State, you're going to get SMU if they win. Ironically, this expansion is allowing Alabama and Ohio State to stay in contention for the playoff. So we're expanding, so you get UCFs and Boise States and SMUs. Hey, you have a chance to win, and really, if you have the 14 playoff this year, Alabama and Ohio State are already out. I think SMU winning the ACC would have thrusted the. I mean, obviously it will this year because you win the ACC, you get a top 4 bye, you get a bye week, automatic bid. But I think if you saw the 14 playoff, SMU would still have a shot because you look at Penn State, Oregon, they play each other. One of those is out. You have Texas, Georgia, winner of that, regardless of automatic bid. But if you were at a 14 playoff, Texas, Georgia winner would be in, loser would be out. So you would have somebody jumping, and you have Ohio State up there. I think SMU would be in before Ohio State because Ohio State, already lost 2 games, but losing to Oregon and then losing to Michigan. So I think it's ironic that this 12-team playoffs is saving Alabama and Ohio State, which Alabama,
yeah, And I
I'm
have a
not sure
huge
they should even
problem.
be in.
I have a problem with that. I mean, Alabama has been such an underwhelming team this season.
It's all about
But
money, rating, and
the
names.
college playoff committee, selection committee knows because of the dominance of Alabama, they have a huge following.
Yeah.
They want to keep the viewership and that following through the playoffs, and that's a bad way to play it. Now, let me put a caveat to that. I'm not upset about. I know that going into this, it was like, well, if you're going to do 12 teams, now the 13th team feels left out. It's like, I don't see that. Like the 13th team had plenty of opportunities to do a job and get there. I mean, the way I see it, Miami is going to be the first team out. Miami should have beat Syracuse. That was their own fault. They had the playoffs in hand. I don't feel sorry that they got left out.
So the rankings are kind of primitive. It's not like these are the top rankings. They're assuming Oregon's going to win the Big Ten. They're assuming Texas is going to win the SEC. They're assuming things. So they're like, oh, they're in the bye. They have their bye week or whatever. So I wouldn't take. There's going to be frustration for some people. I think Indiana is one of them where they're ranked 9. I don't think they're going to put them in.
Yeah.
And you want to say, well, they're 9th and they didn't lose. Why would they drop out? And I'm like, well, you're not looking at honest rankings. Alabama getting in over Indiana. Honestly, if you're looking at best team, Alabama's probably better than Indiana.
I mean, I
don't
think
know.
Indiana's in.
You think?
I think so.
But like you look, Boise State 10. Boise State's going to get a shot up because they have an automatic bid.
Yes.
But yeah, you have Miami, but you have Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss would be Miami. I think they're a better team. I don't think the controversy
Ole Miss is out. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Ole
I
Miss
don't think the controversy so much is going to be the 13th, 14th team. Now, people are going to make it controversial, saying if Indiana drops out, like why, like, well, we're not. These aren't set. We have to, in the end, do playoff aren't like AP rankings. I think the controversy might be the bye weeks. Having a bye week where if SMU wins and gets a bye week, and then you have Tennessee, Ohio State but they're probably better teams than SMU. You assume they would beat SMU most of the time, but now they're playing an extra game. They're playing.
Yeah, I think that's where. But you have. I mean, the way I see it is we're going to have the top 11 teams here.
Yeah.
In the playoff, what we see now is the top 11 ranked teams are going to be in, and then you're going to have either the Arizona State or what was that matchup? The
Arizona State, Iowa State.
Iowa State. Yeah. Sorry. So the winner of that game is who I see. That's the one that's really going to throw this off because you're going to
have, and then if Clemson wins, they're 17. They get an automatic bid.
If they
you
win,
think SMU gets completely thrown out?
No, I think SMU's in the 8. They're the 8.
Okay, well, if Clemson wins, though, they get thrown in too. So that's another. So you say top 11 plus Arizona State,
assuming the top teams win, the teams we expect to win these games.
Because if Clemson wins, Alabama doesn't play, Indiana doesn't play, Tennessee doesn't play, Ohio State doesn't play, Notre Dame doesn't play, but Notre Dame's. So you just move them. Well, Notre Dame's 4. I don't think they're going to get thrown out. So.
No, that's how I see it. I mean, and I'm just assuming. I'm not making any predictions on this team's going to win their championship game today. This team's not. I'm solely going on the top ranked team should win.
Yeah,
we're going to see the top 11 as you see the rankings, and then either Arizona State or Iowa State.
Those are
the only outliers that are not top 12 ranked teams.
So if Clemson beats SMU, you're saying Miami will be out in favor of Arizona State or Iowa State. One of those. So you're saying the committee's going to have to make a decision because they're going to have to put Clemson in, and they're either going to knock out Alabama or
Alabama would have to be. I think Alabama has to be out. You can't. I mean, I think you're going to do such a disservice to this college football playoff if you put Alabama in over SMU, even if they lose a conference championship game, because they're a higher ranked team than Alabama, and they were in their own conference championship.
Yeah. they'll have 2 more wins than SMU.
I mean, I'll say it like the Boise
Alabama.
State. I'll say it like the Boise State coach said it. You're looking at SEC, AC, these Power 4 conferences. You're giving them automatic bids. You're giving them all this extra consideration. You need to look across this whole board, across the entire country. Even if Boise State had lost last night, we still don't think they're a playoff team. Like, they were pretty much win or not get in. We still don't think they should be there to compete.
Their one loss is to Oregon.
Yeah.
In a game they compete.
That's what I'm saying. If they would have lost the championship game, you're saying that that's what we're telling the country as well. They're not as good. They're a superior,
in a BCS era, sure. In a 14 playoff, sure. Like, yeah, this is what we designed the system against. I mean, it's still obviously going to help.
When you still have a committee that's going to select them, that's a problem, because there's always going to be human emotion put into it. They need a system, which there is a way. There's a calculated way
to calculate the computer, and they pick. And instead of 1 and 2 like it was back in the day, they pick the 12. So you can still do automatic bids and all that, and then bring the human element back to seed the teams. Say, hey, just pick the 12 teams, and then we'll come back and seed whatever we need to seed. Because I mean, you might get upset if you're SMU and you get the 12th or 11th seed because they say, "Oh, I don't think you're that good," but you're still in the tournament.
I mean, I don't understand why high school football can figure this out to have huge playoffs, and college football can't figure this out.
Every level of college football except this level has it figured out. And I mean, I think they also did a disservice by taking, I don't know if all conferences took them away, but some of the conferences took away divisions, which makes it more complicated when you have 18 teams. Because you could easily split it down the middle. Everybody plays 8 conference. If you have 18 teams, 9-team divisions, everybody plays 8 teams. So it's not tiebreakers and all this. It's like the best record in Division A.
You're exactly right. They really should go across the entire country, and they should get rid of the conferences, and they should just go to divisions and break it down, like you said, into some 8-team divisions, however you want to do it. And maybe it's the division winners go to the playoff. I mean, you could extend this playoff even more than this. I mean,
I think eventually they have planned to go 16, but
high school football's already been playing. I mean, their playoff system is 6 weeks long?
Yeah, they play 10 games, but that's fine. I mean, you don't have to play 12 regular season games. You can play 10 regular season games, a conference championship if you want. You can still
I don't know how many divisions. I don't know how many divisions it would take to put these teams in like that to make sure you had it. But say you had 12 different divisions of whatever you do, 6, 8 teams, you play each other, and you can play some non-division games. And then the top 2 teams make it to the playoff. Cut out conference championships. You win your conference championship by you already played them and you beat them or you didn't beat them. Whoever's ranked higher, just like high school does, that's your district champ. That's your division champ. The top 2 teams make it to the playoff, have a 24-team playoff, and start 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah. I just think the main issue is the schedule difficulty, but you can't go and even that out. There's no fix for that, because it's, unless you're just going to say, okay, we're going to take, the whatever top 30 teams in there and they're, create a new FBS or create a new thing, because it's not fair to SMU or Boise State if they have no shot, because Boise State can't have the juggernaut of an SEC schedule season in, season out, and still compete. But they can have years where they beat Oklahoma in a BCS bowl. They can make the 12-team playoff this year. It just doesn't work out when you have Georgia and Alabama and Texas and Ohio State and Michigan and the size of the branding. Like, Boise State's never going to get that, no matter, they could, let's say they won the national championship this year, and for the next 3 or 4 years they make the playoff and compete, they're still never going to get to that level. So you have to keep that in mind. But the funny thing is, this year I think the 14 playoff would have worked fine, because you're talking about Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame right now, your top 4. And I think the issue is, well, we always have Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. None of those would be in the top 4. I mean, I guess if Georgia beats Texas, they could get thrust into there, but
Yeah.
Alabama and Ohio State would be out. But it does make for a lot more intriguing content, because right now we're talking about 15 teams possibly could be in the playoff, as opposed to right now you'd probably be like, maybe 7. And there's always going to be controversy, it's like you said, with the human element, because I don't know that a computer would have kept Florida State out because their quarterback was hurt. But they did everything. They won their Power 5 conference championship undefeated.
That's right. All of that should be out the window. You shouldn't take a player injury into consideration when ranking teams or allowing teams. If they win, they win. Because who knows that the second string quarterback doesn't come in and lights it up, You can't penalize that team.
Look at Tua. Alabama came in halftime. I think it was halftime national championship game. And people want to say, well, we don't want blowouts in these playoff games, but every single year there are blowouts.
Mm-hmm.
We get TCU losing to Georgia a couple of years ago. I mean, every single year in the playoffs somewhere there is a blowout. So I mean, you just have to deal with it.
I think that's the problem with college football has, is they're trying to dictate how these games go, and that shouldn't be a factor for them. They shouldn't even be thinking about or considering this game being a blowout or not being a blowout. Rank the teams, put them together, match them up, and let it fall where it falls. Let these teams go and compete.
Yeah. And teams can schedule better teams to help their strength of schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But if they do that, then most of them probably lose those games, and then you have other teams that come up, and then you're complaining about their strength of schedule. It's like everybody can't play a ranked team or a better team. I mean, it's just like comparing it to Texas, although it's funny about Texas, no ranked wins, even though some of these teams aren't ranked because Texas beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt wasn't ranked the next year. Texas beat Texas A&M, whatever. I get it. Currently ranked, whatever. Texas has the most wins against bowl eligible teams of anybody. So it's not like they're playing nobody. I get it. They're in the SEC. But I think the argument of strength of schedule is void. I get it. It definitely is a factor. But going back
there's so many other stats.
Going back to this, you pick your schedule in advance. And I don't mean to be a Texas homer, but they picked Michigan ahead years ago. Michigan just won the national championship. Okay. Sorry, Michigan's not good anymore. You went in.
They didn't know Harbaugh was going to leave, and everything was going to go to hell there.
Yeah, maybe Texas would have lost if Harbaugh was still there, and they still, whatever. But that's exactly why strength of schedule, I think, is a bad argument for your top teams, and is bad for, like, you're saying, well, Boise State didn't play anybody. SMU hasn't really, although SMU beat Pitt, which is another thing we talk about sometimes, because you count that as a top 10 win, even though Pitt's not in the top 10 anymore.
Yeah.
But ranked wins you don't count, just top 10. Because Georgia Tech has a top 10 win this year because they beat Florida State, even though Florida State's 1 win, 2 wins.
Yeah.
But those are, there's so many other factors into it. And I'm not saying Texas should be number 1 or anything like that. They definitely struggled against teams they shouldn't have struggled against. But it's like, until, I don't think Penn State's a top 4 team either. I think they're a really good team, and then, they could probably beat anybody at any given time. But I think they're 8th or 9th ranked team, but because they've won in a power conference and they're in the conference championship game, it doesn't matter, honestly, if they're ranked 10th or 20th, they win, they're in, they get a bye. They'll be a top 4 team anyways.
Yeah.
But sorry to go off of that little tangent. Real quick predictions. We'll just do the top 10. You got Arizona State versus Iowa State. Who you got winning that one?
I haven't seen a lot of Iowa State. Seen a little bit of Arizona State. I take Arizona State there.
I'll take Arizona State too, and I agree that's going to knock Miami out of it. Texas, Georgia, SEC championship game.
I think Texas figures this one out. I think Georgia may go in just a little too cocky here. After winning that last matchup, even being in Austin, for that game, I take Texas here.
Yeah, it's going to be weird. Both teams seem to have bad games. They're trying to make a big deal about it, about Bevo being banned from the SEC championship game because it's too big. He's too big, I guess. I don't know. I don't know that Texas really cares about that. That'd be fun. That'd be a college football type thing to
players
get
don't
around.
care.
The players get around it, and it's kind of like, oh, now Georgia's cursed or
Yeah.
whatever. Interesting fact. That's where the national championship game is. So if Texas does make it, then I guess Bevo's not allowed there too. I guess it's my Texas homerism. I have Texas winning. I just think it's difficult for a team to beat in college football to beat the same team twice.
Yeah, same here. I agree with that.
ACC championship, SMU Clemson.
I'm just going to stand behind. I mean, I don't know how you dated to back any of this up, but I'm going to stand behind SMU. I think they've been hot. And their quarterback play has been phenomenal this season. I take SMU over Clemson. Clemson struggled this season early on. I mean, I'm honestly surprised they even got to this point.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have been, honestly, but I take SMU in that game.
I think SMU dodged a bullet. Not having to play Miami. Not that I don't think they could have won. I mean, it was definitely a winnable game.
Yeah.
They've proven beating Louisville in Louisville. I mean, in Louisville was, I think, top 15 at the time, beating Pitt. So they can win these big time matchups as long as it doesn't get to them. It's a primetime game against a primetime program in Clemson. I know they've been down, but they're a big time program. SMU, definitely the better team. I think SMU is going to take care of it as long as they don't, the lights don't get too bright for them. And then we've already talked about Oregon and Penn State. I think we both are picking Oregon. I know I'm picking Oregon. I don't think Penn State can't do it, but Penn State's just one of those teams that they've been in the situation a lot of times. They should be one of those the teams that make the playoffs year in, year out consistently. And I honestly, I don't even know if they've made a playoff in the last, I guess, 10 years since they've had the playoff, but they've always, most of the time had been in the top 10 ranking and getting big wins, and then something happens. They lose. They can't win the big time game. So I'm going to stick with Oregon on this one. And I guess we'll see how that pans out, if we're all right, wrong. Next week, we could probably talk a little bit about college football, because I mean the playoffs will start early. I think like the 21st or something. It's the week before Christmas is when the first games are, to allow for the 4 weeks.
We'll definitely be able to weigh in on our opinions about who's in and who's out.
Yeah, we're not going to have to wait a month and a half like we used to in the BCS era to actually see some meaningful games. When I got to get through the first couple of weeks of bowl season just to see something good. But yeah, we'll talk about that. I know we have Cowboys. We didn't really talk much on that, but we'll talk about their Monday night game, the Simpsons game. We'll talk about how that turned out. Maybe critique Disney and ESPN and animators, and see if it's kind of, I wouldn't call the Toy Story game back in, a failure, but it definitely had some bugs. We'll see if they can work, because I think it's similar how they do it. But thanks for watching this episode of Leadoff. However you're tuning in, hit that like button if you like the show. If not, hit it twice, and don't forget to subscribe. With Tony, I'm Ashton. Have a great Saturday and a great weekend.